welcome to another episode of the Forge Forward podcast. My name is Phil De Cruz, and alongside me we've got the infamous Courtney Smith from Connection Quality and Firefly. How you going, mate? Say hi to your fans out there, Courtney.
Very good, very good. I've just come off the weekend watching the weekend, so I've had a ripper. I'm looking forward to Monday and getting into this, mate.
Excellent. And mate, we're only 5 weeks out, so stuff is ramping up. And we've got an exciting guest today, mate. We've got Ronan from Intelligent Resourcing. And thank you for joining us and sharing your insights and experiences and how we're shaping the future. How you going, mate?
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, as we gather at the Forge conference, you know, we focus on the cutting edge innovations that's driving the industries forward. And having a friend like you at Forge, it's going to be a tremendous experience. And I can't wait to really go into the deep expertise in the specific areas that you do. So thank you again. And let's kick things off, mate. Courtney.
Yeah, look, Forge is going to be a ripper. Why? Because we're mashing up a lot of things. You know, we're looking at the background of the past and comparing change into the future. So, you know, mashups across a few panels, some really high quality keynote speakers like Ronan today are bringing information to bear, and we expect anyone attending will step away with some signals that they weren't expecting to get on the way in. So before we get into the innovation side, maybe a little bit about you, Ronan, the journey, the experiences that have led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, there are no coincidences. I live 200 meters away from the Forge in Footscray. So, you know, small world, right? Wouldn't want to paint it, but it's small world.
No, and that's part of it. And thank you for giving us that, because we haven't spoken to that yet in any of the sessions, Ronan. There's an exclusive opportunity for a few select attendees to come along to Waterside Metal Art in Brunswick, Footscray. What was it officially? Footscray on the water there. So I can't wait. It's going to be a ripper.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, a little bit about me. Look, I've had what I would call an uncareer. Now, for a decade, I traveled the world. I lived in India. I worked on cruise ships, including one that sunk. You kind of know that story. I was a dealer, pit boss, casino manager. And then 24 years ago, I emigrated to Australia. Just had my anniversary yesterday. Got married 24 years ago.
Wow, where are you beating me? Congratulations.
It's not a competition, which just means I'm older than you.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, right? Today's world, it could be.
Yeah. And so I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. So for a decade, I had so much fun traveling the world. No real responsibilities. And then when I started to look at companies I want to work for, I couldn't really find any that aligned to my values. And I just didn't want to settle, which is one of the reasons why I started traveling the world. And so I started my own first business. First year was really tough. Sunk my life savings, $30,000 in, and I had $600. I had one sale. And luckily enough, I met somebody who showed me how to use Google SERPs back in 2003. Optimize my website. Yeah, early on. And so we're talking about
marketing in your title. Wow, 2003.
We're talking early adoption, right? When you get ahead of the curve, which is what this show's about. And within 2 weeks, I got my first sale from that at $1,500, and the next one, and I was off to the races. But I'll never forget that somebody showed me something I didn't know, that I couldn't figure out myself. And from there, it just kind of grew. So that scaled to like 300 events a year across all of Australia. But then I also realized about a decade into this business journey that I actually hadn't invested in myself. So I started paying for courses, coaches, reading, and just upskilling myself, and the more you learn, the more you realize you actually don't know anything. And so I sold that business, tried a couple of others, some of them successful, some of them not so. And then I've now landed on Intelligent Resourcing, and using a lot of my experience and knowledge, and also just, you know, implementing some of the things that I see are on the horizon now, just similar to that story I shared of, 20 years ago, so that I kind of future-proof what I'm doing.
Yeah, look, it's quite amazing to watch your journey, Ronan. Just in the last, 50 days, following your LinkedIn profile on the launch of IR, it's been incredible to watch you taking the same sort of thinking that you applied in 2003 to modern digital. So how are you finding the modern digital versus back in 2003 placement of ads and the like?
It's far more complicated, and so there's been this huge dispersion of expertise and knowledge. So you get someone who is a funnel expert, you'll get someone who is specific on ads, you'll get all of these expertise that weren't available 20 years ago. And the hardest thing for a small business is to wear all those hats and understand them. And secondly, know enough to, when you hire someone externally, because most of us kind of outsource in one capacity or another, that you're not going to get someone who's going to rip you off. And you hear it all the time. You know, I paid someone to do this for me and they massively overpromised and underdelivered. So it's having enough knowledge and dipping your toes in. You don't have to be an AI expert. You don't have to be a coder. You just have to know enough that you can ask some robust questions to the person that is promising you that they're going to deliver something.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because the question I was going to ask next was about what sort of category do you fall into in respect to this AI revolution that's been unboxed and unleashed. I spoke recently at an event, and I really noticed three types of participants. The visionary, the person that's diving in, wants to be part of it, the cautious explorer, someone that's prepared to step in and have a look, and then the resistor. And I saw all three like very viscerally in this speaking spot that I spoke to. So which one are you and why?
I'm in between the two. So number one, I wouldn't say I'm quite all in, but secondly, you know, last weekend I was going through Udemy and doing a course on ChatGPT prompts. And so I know I will never be as good as someone that's going to be an expert in AI and really dive into that. But going back to my answer previously, is that I want to know enough that I can weed out the BS from the people that really know their stuff. And if you're talking to other people and you're also implementing some of those things, you want to be able to know enough that you know, someone asks you, how do you know that? And I find that most people then really struggle with that secondary answer. Sound like they're an expert, and you go, how do you know that? And, oh, well, and then it quickly falls away. So I don't want to be that person. And so that's why I'm in between those two specific sort of labels or categories.
And you have to be curious and you have to play, right? Like they're the two variables that make a distinction for that visionary type person, is they're prepared to look into the rabbit's hole or whatever it is you want to call it and give it a go and go deeper. Yeah, look, it's something dear to my heart. So I'd like to pretend that I've got a little bit of caution, but I don't think I do, mate. So that's my unfortunate weakness.
Well, that curiosity, right? You know, I've read 400 books in the last 8 years. I've certified innovation officer. And so I'm continually trying to upgrade my knowledge, my thinking, my vulnerabilities, blind spots, so that you don't wake up one day and say, you know, oh, look, why are you doing that? Well, we've always done it this way. You know, it's one of the most dangerous phrases in business. And going back to what I was saying earlier about you not knowing it all, you can't. If you're working 40, 50 hours a week in your business and you're delivering on what you know and you've built legacy systems and processes, you just don't have time to vet other people. Or where do you get the time to be curious to say, what if I ripped up my existing business model or playbook and did something different that is out there?
Well, maybe at Forge, it might be a good spot to disseminate some information and see some signals you hadn't thought of.
Yeah, because you're guaranteed, right? If you hang around smart, curious people, they'll come up with something that you've never thought of, heard of, just by surround yourself with those curious, innovative people. You know, you might go to traditional networking events and it's just the same people talking the same BS, or you're inside your industry. You know, everyone's got this legacy thinking. So this is the only way to grow. This is the only way that the market will be. And then you need someone to shake you up out of that legacy thinking, to go, I hadn't thought of that before. I've not heard of that before. Tell me more. And just give a different perspective.
And talking about unique perspectives, I've been following your content on LinkedIn, and I love the stuff that you're putting out there. And I want you to give a taste. So what you're going to speak about Forge, but what do you want the attendees to walk away with after listening to your insights?
I always want to walk away, for me, with a different perspective, something that challenges your belief system, your status quo, because otherwise you're just not going to move forward. There's nothing worse than going to a conference and it just being shelf education. You go, oh, that was amazing and fantastic, and then you go back to BAU. You go back to that kind of legacy of not kind of looking to disrupt yourself. So I know that when I have one-on-one conversations with people, when I mentor people, within about 15, 20 minutes, I guarantee I'll give them an idea they haven't thought of, something new, whether that's their business model, the way they're thinking, a perspective they haven't thought of. And not because I'm particularly really, really smart. I've just read a lot. And so I've taken other smart people's ideas and gone, here's a great idea that someone else wrote a whole book about, but I can synthesize those ideas very, very quickly.
And that's excellent. Yeah. And you deliver a great message. And I think it's a good avenue that what you put yourself out there on LinkedIn and delivering this message to these people that don't have the time to condense, other great messages in those big novels, as you say. I think you're like 10 years in the future, same as Courtney. So I would like to say, how do you see the future, and what is probably the largest signal that's made you stand up and say, geez, I better look in that deeper, like AI and so on?
Okay. Two things. I don't think we're 10 years in the future because it's rapidly evolving. Because if we were, we'd be pioneers, and pioneers go hungry. They're the ones that starve.
I've starved plenty of times, Brian, and I've starved.
But in answer to your question, Phil, I've been reading a couple of books that all tie the thinking together. Is that I think we're going to have disinflation, which means that you might have been able to charge $5,000, $10,000 for your product or service. Not all of them, but that's going to be worth less. So someone can do that for $1,000, $2,000, and still make a profit, a good profit. And then secondly, and this puts me in a bit of a doom mention, is that AI is actually a job destroyer, not a net creator of jobs. And so everyone else agrees on this. They said, oh yes, there'll be other jobs. There'll be more touchy-feely, so sort of personal jobs. Most of those are not particularly well paid. So if your service industry jobs traditionally are not anywhere near as well paid as white collar coding, high level, finance, all of those things. AI can do a whole bunch of things that most finance professionals are going to be made redundant. So where are they going to get another finance job? No, they might get a job in something more touchy-feely. But if there's thousands and thousands of people all applying for that same job, then guess what? They're going to pay less. So I actually think there's going to be a bigger gap between the people that are able to deliver on some of these future-proofing skills, and then there's going to be others that are going to be hollowed out someone and competing for the same lower-paid job that they can't get the same job anymore.
And then maybe possibly when the AI robots come in, those touchy-feely jobs are gone as well.
I can't see that in this particular curve. Nowhere near do they have that kind of human interaction. But what they are fantastic at doing is automating jobs. So, again, 200 years ago, Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, and he gave an example of the pin company of separating tasks into something that's repeatable. Henry Ford did an amazing job of that. It became the very first kind of production model, which everyone followed for the last 100 years. AI is going to be able to do the same thing. It's going to take a lot of particular processes and do them faster, better, cheaper than any single human can do. So then where is the value? The value is in creating two different ideas and melding them together to create value. That's something that AI can't do. But what it can do is a repeatable process. It can do it so much better. And so, yes, there will be these jobs for, as I said, sort of the human element, the aspect, but they're not going to be, AI is not going to do that, and robots are not going to be doing those anytime soon.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting conundrum piece for me because it depends on where you look, right? And it depends on who you're listening to as to what they think. So there's a gentleman online, Sven Basher, who produces a very good innovation piece around the future of automation, robotics, and things like that. He thinks there'll be 1 billion robots before it impacts any human job. But the challenge that something that creates is 1 billion robots changes everyone's mindset to what can be achieved. So home care might not be the first application, but doing something in a trench that's dangerous, that traditionally could put lives at risk, are jobs that we don't necessarily want humans doing anyway. So this is a really interesting S-curve mashup that's taking place. Robotics, AI, certainly energy. These are all things that are coming across the top of each other. And for those out there that don't know, I'm hoping to have a few people or find a few people for lunch on the 11th, which is when our good friend, Mr. Elon Musk, launches his next phase of his S-curve domination. Now the richest man in the world for seeing the future. Took some risks, some big risks. All right, let's get into the future a little bit, given we're talking about it now. Any emerging trends that really stand out for you, Ronan?
AI is absolutely the biggest one, and so I think 12 months ago it was probably blockchain and crypto and everything. I think that's taken a bit of a backseat because we've gone from, again, I think those pioneers 5 years ago were banging on about AI and no one was listening. Now they've proved kind of right to a certain aspect, and so that's now, I think people have gone from that's a nice to have to actually when they see now the real applications. And you and I, Courtney, have been showing people this, opening the hood a little bit and going. It then creates that kind of paradigm shift. Whereas 5 years ago, it was kind of hypothetical. Oh, AI's coming, it's going to take your job, blah blah blah. Now we've actually hit that kind of real world. And the interesting thing about all kinds of innovation, and everything, is that once the genie's out of the bottle, even the people who kind of invented this stuff, they actually don't know where it's going to be taken. So there's always this second order consequences. It took about 20, 30 years for the true power of steam to be harnessed into factories maybe 200 years ago. And then electricity is the same thing. So all of you create this invention and you actually don't necessarily know where it's going to go. You think it's going to be implemented in this industry or that, it's going to affect that job. But often, again, people meld that together and come up with second order consequences that no one understood. So I think that's the unknown. So everyone giving you predictions of, oh, it's going to do this, going to do that. They actually don't know. And what will happen is it'll take a life on its own.
Yeah, look, you mentioned the industrial ages. They've been shortening every single one. I don't know if you noticed. We're actually 20 years into the industry 4.0, as they called it. But I've got this feeling that this next wave, I'm not quite sure exactly what this next industrial wave is, whether it's part of 4.0, it's its new emerging wave, is going to really shake up fast and furious. Things that I've seen occur in the last couple of years have dwarfed what I originally thought was the biggest single shift in mobile, being one of the biggest shifts of human engagement. So we're stepping right into it now. What are you finding, Phil? I mean, it's an interesting paradigm to think that we've got to change as humans. I mean, it's a bit of a funky thought process for people to consider that they might need to change too.
Well, yeah, I always see these AI agents that are out there. You neither adapt and got on board, or you're left behind. I always see the AI tools I use. They're not necessarily taking over my life. They're my brainstorming partner. They're assisting me. They're making me more productive. They're getting to the answer that I'm seeking quicker. And people need to take advantage of that. And I think education needs to be there. And that whole knowledge thing. And I think that's one thing of what we're doing at Forge. It's a conduit to give you that information that you need to learn of how AI is evolving.
And you always scare me, mate, because I already know how you operate. And a super Phil, wow, I want to have a job next year. It's scary.
Yeah.
I love the phrase I heard once that the only human that likes change is a baby and it's nappy. Humans dislike change considerably. We are creatures of habit and we are slow. And as much as you might say, I'm actually adaptable and thing. Once we get stuck in our ways, we come kicking and screaming. And I think you have two choices right now. As you said, the adoption curve, Courtney, is getting quicker and quicker. And you have two choices. You can sit on the fence and wait for 2-3 years time, and then by then it's almost too late. Your business model, your customers, your processes so far out of date. Or you can, as I said, dip your toe in the water and take those first incremental changes. No one's going to just completely rip up their business model unless it's really not working already. Yeah. But if they're not leaning into certain aspects of this and starting to just change a few small things, like Phil is saying, I'm sure in the next 12, 18 months, there will be quantum changes inside Connection that you can implement. Once someone else has, battle tested it or got the first MVP out of the way, you'll find other things that you'll be implementing that will have significant changes. So Absolutely. At the moment, some of them are sort of incremental and a few small changes, but others are kind of massive. And if you look at adoption curves, I think startups and scale-ups have a competitive advantage if they change their thinking over legacy businesses. The reason being, in most of Asia and Africa, I'll give you an example, they skipped landlines. So in Australia, 99% of us, 0.9, have got landlines connected. Now, that technology was too slow, too expensive in big parts of the developing world. They've gone straight to mobile. They don't have a legacy hardware of phones. So that's just one example of businesses today. And Courtney, you and I have looked at some of the software out there for sales and marketing and processes. They can jump straight to that and all of a sudden scale quicker and do things faster, cheaper than a traditional business that says, I've got all these stakeholders. We've got to have 50 meetings around this. We can't do that because of blah, blah, blah. They're going to bypass them and create that massive value quite quickly.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question about it. And the intriguing bit when you say those things is I instantly think of the people that are saying to me, oh, look, I just jumped in the caravan, grabbed the Starlink, worked like I was working anywhere, didn't make a difference. I could do it globally if I chose. We are in a smaller world. And if you're not adapting and not moving, I think you're going to be left behind.
Is there any advice you would give to innovators who want to make an impact across the various industries, particularly around blue collar?
Blue collar is probably not a massive industry that I know really well, and this is a generalization. Traditionally, blue collar have been the slowest to adapt. Yeah. And all the stats again that I read, and it's playing out already in the US. If you look at where manufacturing has been hollowed out in developed countries, Australia, UK, the US, and it goes back to my point earlier, how many of those car workers and steel workers got a comparable job at what they were getting paid before? And the answer is none of them, almost none of them. They've had to take lower paid jobs, or they've had to spend some time reskilling and changing who they are and readapting who they are. Otherwise, there just aren't any of those well-paid blue-collar jobs. And the same thing's going to happen to non-blue collar jobs as well, to a certain degree as well.
Even faster for white collar. There's an interesting thing that was just taking place just this week was the massive port on the east coast of America. The unions shut down the ports on the basis, and you get ready for this. Their first request was they wanted a guarantee of double pay within the next 5 years, but the other bit I think was 5 years. But the bit that took me aghast was I was like, holy geez! Now we're talking similar to the movie industries and the creative industries. Was that we don't want any automation of tasks for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So these are people fighting for their lives, Ronan, in terms of what their future looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the pushback, and that's why we can't predict how many of these technologies are going to go all the way or where they're going to go, and also the pushback. Again, if you're a study of history, the Luddite movement, all of those things, there's been throughout the last 200 years this massive change in technology, but also kind of pushback. Again, some really weird facts. There was nearly 500,000 people in New York in the early 1950s that were elevator operators. they would close the door and push the button.
Great
It's got
story.
automated. Yeah, 500,000 people are out of a job, and so this is happening all of the time, but at a faster rate. And yes, there'll be pushback. And interesting enough, the pushback from the shift of 200 years ago is that kings and queens and rulers pushed back on technology because they were responsible for feeding these citizens, and so they actually stopped and in some cases destroyed innovation. There's a story of 2,000 years ago, a famous king killed somebody that had an innovation that would have put a number of people out of work. Who wants starving peasants when you're a king? They're gonna uprise against.
Yeah, or the one where you burn books, which is another innovation in history, which is reading and writing, right? Where you don't want information passed because you become someone that looks silly in front of those around you. Really funny you mentioned elevators, and to talk about innovation at a super quick level, I'll just lean into it. We've got a wonderful customer of ours, Kone Elevators, who are coming on Forge, and one of their latest innovations, you wouldn't believe, is actually mechanical innovation. They invented a new rope technology because the buildings were getting so high that the old school what would you call it, iron rope or steel rope was so heavy that they couldn't get it up into the new buildings. So they've created this amazing new mechanical technology, new manufacturing process for rope that can go, I think, up to 1 kilometre high, right? Changing. So it doesn't always have to be digital, is I guess the point I'm trying to make. There's all sorts of things that come out of, but I think AI might actually increase that curve as well, because you can run sims, you can do assessments, you can sort of think in new and interesting ways, which you might not have been able to do. So sorry for that little segue, but when you mentioned elevators, I couldn't help myself on that note.
Well, again, there's all these second order consequences and unintended consequences, and we now live in an incredibly complex system. You look at COVID and the supply chains all got disrupted. The amount of touch points just to make something as simple as a pizza or even a biro that you've got, the amount of all the people that go through that, from design to just forging a simple bit of plastic and all those other things, incredibly complex. And so when you change a system, you have unintended consequences and unforeseen. And so everyone tells you they kind of know the future is lying. What you can do is make a guess, and then you'll see all of these other strange things that people haven't thought of coming out of the back end of that.
Totally agree.
Let's start wrapping this up, because we're actually approaching the 30-minute mark. It's actually been.
I didn't even look until you mentioned that. I thought we were like 14 minutes a moment.
I was like, holy hell. But one thing that we like to hone in is strategies and signals. But what strategies do you rely on to stay ahead of trends and ensure continued success across industries?
I think I've shared probably this with Courtney in a couple of sort of private sessions. I think you have to look at what everyone else is doing and try and find the courage to do something that no one else is doing, and what that looks like. And that puts you in a blue ocean rather than a red ocean. That allows you to add more value to your customers. And if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But if you can start to do that, you create a gap, and sometimes it's called a defensible moat, whatever you want to call it. It allows you to start to figure out something that other people aren't willing to do. And if you can do that, then you're on the path to something both valuable and something that you've got some leeway to lean into. So that's what I always do. And most people misunderstand strategy, but that might be for another day to kind of talk about strategy.
So our plan at Forge is to create mashups, to create opportunities for unique perspectives to be created, interesting speakers like yourself to join a conversation and provide insights and signals for the audience, which we can then ideally bring to bear over the course of the event and close out with some really good reasons to attend the couple of days we have. So day one being an innovation day, and day two being a practical day demonstrating technologies that we think actually will be deliverable in the near future or now. So on that note, and given that we're approaching 30, I think we're going to close up today. Is there anything specifically that if someone came, and I think you mentioned this earlier, but we'll just rehash it, that if someone came up and introduced themselves and said, "Hi, Ronan, I'm so-and-so. What can you give me as a piece of advice that I could take away from today that would be valuable?" Is there anything that just stands out for you?
For me, it's always implementation, not information. Information is a commodity these days. You know, every answer to your problem is pretty much out there. So it's not about information; it's about implementation. And so if you walk away from Forge and you've gone, that was amazing, but you implement nothing, you might as well kind of set your dollars on fire. So that's one of the reasons I like that you're doing some practical examples and getting people sort of, you know, their first dip on the tools of AI and a couple of other things so that they can demystify it and start to implement. So it's all about implementation. And
we have a range of amazing partners coming, so we're all going to have a blast. And if you don't get there, because I know how much fun I'm going to have. I'm going to be in my element. So great to have you on board. Fantastic you could give your time today to give a bit of a sense of who you are and what you bring to the table. We can't wait to have you on a panel and talking about what you're doing in a bit more robust format. So thanks so much. Phil, do you want to bring us home?
Thank you very much, Ronan. Your forward-thinking insights is very, very interesting, and I can't wait to actually see you at the Forge Summit.
Love it. Thanks for having me. I'll see you there.
All right, see you there.